what's up you guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Kylie if this is your first time here, and today, welcome back to another episode of Glaringly Outgrown Roots. Just kidding, the topic of today's video is actually the hits and misses of content in 2020. I was just gonna focus this video on horror movies, but there is so much stuff that came out that I watched last year that's also including like action and sci-fi and stuff like that that I wanted to mention as well. So we have about 40 titles or so to go through in this video, so I'm gonna jump into that very soon, but I just wanted to mention very briefly that I do have another video coming out today on my vlog channel. I recently finally upgraded from having all my movies in a pile on the floor to putting them on shelves. So I just documented the process of me organizing them, and I made it to kind of help you guys out if you wanted tips on how to organize your stuff. I thought maybe it would inspire some of you. And there are just a lot of really good relaxing time lapses, so if nothing else you can watch it to just vibe. Oh, and I also did purge a couple movies from my collection, just ones that I wasn't really rewatching. Those will be up on my Poshmark account. Yes, Poshmark, not Depop. I did try Depop for a little while. I don't like it. It's very confusing to me. So my Poshmark is at KaiJohns13. You can also find about half of my closet on Poshmark, I think including this shirt, honestly. I have a ridiculous amount of clothing that I'm trying to get rid of, and it's all really good stuff. It's all stuff that's in really good shape and it's cute. It's just the new year. I kind of wanted to purge some stuff and I'm trying to minimize this year. I'm trying to get rid of a lot of the stuff that I don't need. So seriously, like half of my closet is up for grabs. That'll be linked down below. My vlog channel in that video will also be linked down below, as well as my Patreon. If you want to support me on Patreon, you do get some extra content every month, so I highly recommend checking that out. My first video that's going up on there is going to be me definitively ranking the characters of Twilight. Alright, but onward with the topic of today's video. I'm going in order of release date, starting in January, ending with December, so let's just get right into it. Okay, so the first movie on this list is The Grudge, which came out on January 3rd. So this movie is kind of confusing. It's sort of a sequel, but not really, because it takes place at the same time of the events of the first American Grudge movie, I think. And it's also not a reboot because it's part of the same timeline, kind of, so it's very strange. I got about 2 minutes into the movie, and after the first scare, I was like, yeah, no. So I couldn't really tell you much about it. I do know that it just got really glaringly terrible reviews across the board, so I'm assuming I'm not really missing out on much by not having seen the whole thing. I really, honestly, God, only watched the first couple minutes. I could just tell the vibes were bad. The first scare was super stupid. I don't think it's really worth talking about that much, and we have a lot to cover, so I'm gonna move on. Oh, I almost forgot. Yeah, okay, so The Grudge, released on January 3rd, is a miss. Okay, up next, came out on January 8th, is Underwater. This movie, I'm not totally sure about at the moment. I want to say it's a miss because I actually couldn't get through it, but that being said, having only seen about the first hour of the movie, maybe it's a hit in the last half hour. Although I will say that if a movie is not good and not gripping my attention and very boring within the first hour, I'm gonna venture a guess and say that it's alright that I deem it as a miss. There was a lot that should have been going for this movie. For one thing, I like Kristen Stewart. She was starring in this movie. It had a pretty good cast. Save for the comedian that they cast, I just don't think that the levity, it wasn't working for me. I didn't want him there. It's also very sci-fi. It was kind of a creature feature. It took place miles underwater. A ton of crazy stuff was happening. They were in this sort of lab research unit kind of a thing. So the premise and everything surrounding this movie and the stuff that was going on should have been interesting. So tell me why it wasn't. Because in my opinion, if you have a sci-fi sort of thriller creature feature that takes place miles underneath the ocean's surface, it should be inherently interesting, right? I feel like that's kind of hard to mess up. So needless to say, Underwater was a miss. Next up, this is a movie that I was highly anticipating for 2020, and I didn't end up seeing it because of the terrible reviews. And to this day, no one is really talking about it unless they're like, oh yeah, that was a piece of crap. The Turning came out on January 24th, and it's a movie that I really wanted to see. I still kind of want to see it, but it also very much gives me The Boy type of vibes, but I know it's also based off of One Flew Over the Cuckoo. No. What book is it based off of? The Turning of the Screw! Ugh, dummy. So I don't know, maybe I should watch for myself, but the unanimous opinion seems to be that it's a miss. If I ever watch it someday, I'll let you know how I feel. Up next, one of the most underrated movies of the year. One of my favorite movies that came out in 2020. The Vast of Night was released on January 26th, and if you're not familiar with this movie, I am going to read you the synopsis because it is so worth seeing. So this received a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, okay? In the 1950s, 1960s, two children search, well, they're more like teenagers, they're not really children. Two teenagers search for the source of a mysterious frequency that has descended on their town. Severely underrated. It's so good. This movie might not be for everybody. It is a little bit more on like the artsy side. There are a lot of one-shots. A lot of the takes are so unbelievably long, and it's just a testament to the talent of these actors that they had because they never broke character. They had amazing performances. And also the setting was amazing because we had these super long shots following characters and whatnot. Sometimes we'd be following them around a school campus, or we'd be following them down a long street, down a road, and the vibes were never off. They were extremely consistent. The color palette of the movie, mwah. And there is a super crucial element to this movie that I want to talk about so badly because it's why I love it so much, but I'm gonna let you go in blind. You'll figure out what it is pretty quickly, I think, so just please watch it. So The Vast of Night receives the very first hit on my list.
Hi, I'm editing right now and I realized I completely forgot to talk about one of the movies on my list, and it is called His House. It was released on January 27th, and there has been so much buzz about it recently, especially on Twitter, and I didn't like it at all, and I'm not sure what exactly I'm missing. It's just the movie felt like it was trying way too hard. It was giving me somewhat Jordan Peele type of a vibes, but it just kind of failed to deliver in the same way. And at times it seemed like the movie wanted to be making commentary because this was a movie about refugee immigrants, but that obviously was not the sole purpose of the movie. That just happened to be the background story of these characters. So it was just a little bit weak to me because had they gone more the route of social commentary and followed through with that a bit more, I think the movie would have been better for it. However, they went the more weird and artsy horror route, and I just don't think that it really served the story very well. It didn't serve the characters very well, and I was honestly kind of bored throughout the movie. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of the scares are really good, but it's basically like all jump scares, but they are effective. Like, even watching it on a smaller screen at home, I was pretty scared. So I honestly wouldn't recommend this. However, I always recommend trying out a movie for yourself to see if you like it, and with this one especially because there is so much hype and so many people like it, you should maybe try it out, but it's a miss for me.
Alright, moving on to the last movie that came out in January, and that would be Gretel and Hansel, which was released on January 31st. There was a very strange group of people that did not like this movie because they thought that it was supposed to be some sort of feminist message. Watch Sarah Hawkinson's video, Possessed by Horror, if you haven't seen it yet. She does a review of that movie and she talks about the issues that people have with it and its feminist undertones. One of the reasons, and I kid you not, why they thought this was that it was called Gretel and Hansel and not Hansel and Gretel. Like, they put the feminine name first. So there's that. I don't feel that that's a valid criticism of the movie whatsoever. There are not really any feminist undertones that I remember. Some of the story, I need to rewatch this movie because one, it's phenomenal, but also there might have been some sort of undertones of like feminine empowerment, but they're not glaring. It is not the sole focus of the movie. That's not like the main message, if you will. One valid criticism why you might not like this movie is that maybe it's a little bit boring. It was marketed as a horror movie, as a very typical kind of jump scare horror movie, and that is not what it is. This movie is extremely artsy. The plot is a little bit thin because the main focus of this movie is the visuals. I have not seen a horror movie so beautiful in my life. Like, I'm trying right now to think of another horror movie that was so visually stunning, and honestly, none come to mind, because here's the thing. With this movie, it is so visually stunning. It steps outside the bounds of its predecessors. It steps outside the bounds of what has been done before. It is gorgeous. So if for no other reason, watch it for the visuals. If you're not a visual heavy type of person, it's not the movie for you, and it's not super scary or anything like that. So if you want a horror movie, that's not it. But this movie is a hit. One of my favorite movies of 2020. Alright, moving on to February, and the first movie I want to talk about from February is Fantasy Island, which was released February 6th. This was a movie that was a miss for a lot of people, and for similar reasons to Gretel and Hansel, because it was marketed as a horror movie, when in reality, it has some horror elements, but it's more of an action-adventure movie. And there's also quite a bit of comedy in there, so I don't even know. I don't even really know what to call this movie, but it is a hit for me. me, and here's why. It's not a fantastic movie, but I do really like the setting. I love the island. It's gorgeous. I love the adventure action type of feel of the movie, and this movie falls into a very, 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 very specific subgenre of movie that I really like for some reason that I can't figure out. But this movie, as well as Truth or Dare from 2017, are both movies that they wanted to be horror movies, but they weren't quite. They're also both relatively unaware of themselves. I think that their target audience is teenagers, so that's why some of it is a little more dialed back and a little bit more corny. But these movies do not feel self-aware at all. And the other thing they have in common is they both star Lucy Hale, and I love them both. I don't know why. I don't know why. But for some reason, all those factors really work for me. I would equate this to my guilty pleasure of loving The Bye-Bye Man. Same with like The Haunting of Molly Hartley. They both kind of have those vibes, just they're kind of so bad that they're good. Fantasy Island it's not terrible. It's really, I don't want to say that it's so bad that it's good. No, it's kind of true though. But with Fantasy Island, I actually did kind of genuinely like the story. It's not executed very well at all. It's kind of goofy, but the lack of self-awareness that the movie has is why I was enjoying it so much, and the cast is really good. So like it or not, Fantasy Island was a hit for me. Next up, Birds of Prey came out on February 7th, and this is one that I unfortunately did not get to see. I've seen mixed things about this movie. There's a very small group of people that really love it. I guess that they felt some sort of feminine empowerment from it. If you're one of those people, please let me know why you liked the movie, because it seems like the general consensus is that it's quite bad, but I don't know because I haven't seen it yet. I had so much stuff on my list to watch, like just in preparation for this video of all the stuff that I wanted to see, but I didn't have a chance to see it last year, so I spent the last couple weeks just watching all of these movies. And Birds of Prey was one that I just didn't happen to watch. So let me know your thoughts on that, but I'm gonna move on. Up next is Brahms the Boy 2 that came out on February 19th, and it just was not good. I don't know what else to say. It was dry, it was uninspired. It had kind of an interesting twist because I do like the first Boy movie, and the twists were decent, but the execution of it was just very lazy and it didn't work out well. So that's one that doesn't really need much discussion. The Boy 2 is a miss for me. Now folks, up next, yes, we have The Invisible Man, which was released on February 24th. This movie kind of speaks for itself because I feel like everybody has talked about this. This is on everybody's top 10 of 2020 lists. Lee Wanell, he's done it again. Just a phenomenal movie. You probably know about it. You've probably seen it. I think that's honestly enough said. I think we know. It's a hit. Up next is the first TV show on this list, and it is a Netflix original. It is called I Am Not Okay With This. That was released on February 26th. So this stars some of our favorite actors from It 2017. And this was sort of a coming of age show, and it was about this girl that was coming to terms with her sexuality and also her telekinesis. When I first saw the trailers for it, I was like, oh, that is literally just a crossover between Stranger Things and the end of the fucking world. And lo and behold, at the end of the trailer it said, from the producers of Stranger Things and the end of the fucking world. So those people kind of seem like one-trick ponies, because when I watched this show, it was indeed exactly like a mixture of those two shows. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I would actually say that this show was kind of a hit. I thought it was good. Do I think it was necessary though? I'll let you decide. And now I think it's being shopped out to another network to continue the show. I'm not really sure if it's still gonna be airing on Netflix, but we'll see. I'm also not really that interested in a second season. Like, I don't really care. So my final consensus of I Am Not Okay With This is a hit-ish. Up next is a movie that I wish I had made time to see, but I haven't yet, and that is Guns Akimbo, which came out on February 28th. This is a nutty movie that stars Daniel Radcliffe. He wakes up, he has guns nailed to his hands, and he's basically kind of living almost a video game type situation. So I don't know much more about it, but all those factors, it seems great. So that is still on my list. I'm still planning on watching that soon. I'll let you know if I ever do. It's a hopeful hit. I'm hoping it will be a hit. All right, next up, we have a couple of movies to talk about from March, and the first movie from March is Onward, which was released on March 6th. So this is a Disney Pixar movie, and it is very cute. It's a really sweet story. It's very well told. The animation is gorgeous. The voice acting is really good, except that we don't support Chris Pratt in this household, no sir. But that aside, it was a well done movie. Here's my thing though. Disney and Pixar, I'm gonna need you to look at me right now. I'm gonna need you to listen. Stop making coming of age movies where one of the main character's parents is dead or dies in the movie. Disney and Pixar, seriously, like, I'm gonna need you to hear this. Believe it or not, there are other ways to provide exposition and background trauma for characters. And that being said, why do all main characters need to have some form of trauma? Maybe let's unpack that. Our main character's father has died, and it basically sets up the premise for the entire movie, and I understand this movie could not have happened, all the events would not have happened if the dad was not dead, because it's all contingent upon them seeing him one last time. So it was obviously necessary for this movie. I'm just please, like, from now on, can we leave that behind? Starting in 2021, I no longer have time for that. You know what, maybe I should make a video about things I no longer have time for in 2021. Let me know if you want to see that. So I will say that this movie, it was a hit. It's a good movie. The premise was a no-go for me, but it's a hit. I recommend it. It's a good movie. Okay, up next is a docu-series that actually came out on Disney Plus last year, and it is called Cosmos Possible Worlds. This came out on March 9th, and I've only watched the first episode, but when I tell you, this is one of the best docu-series I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean that shit. It's hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is like a little bit jarring. It's a little bit weird, but the animation is so gorgeous. So this is actually a follow-up to Cosmos: A Space-Time Odyssey, but Tyson returns as the host to translate more revelations of science into a lavish, transporting experience, taking audiences on a series of spiritual voyages of exploration. The show reveals previously uncharted realms, including lost worlds, worlds yet to come, and the worlds that humans may one day inhabit. It's so gorgeous, and dare I say, it is worth getting Disney Plus just to watch this show. Like, this show is not just a hit, I mean, it's a do you follow? Like, it is that good. Now, your enjoyment of it is probably contingent upon you being a stoner, you being really into science, you being really into space, you being very into the advancement of humankind and learning about humankind's past and where we came from, the evolution of Earth and the future and where we could go, space travel, dreams. I'm very passionate about it. It's a very, very good show. I could keep going about that show, but I don't want to get too worked up, so I'm gonna move on. Up next is The Hunt, which came out on March 13th, and it is the last movie I ever saw in a movie theater. This is another one of those kind of action, horror, comedy kind of a things. It had somewhat similar vibes to Fantasy Island. The plot was also pretty convoluted, but also very relevant to kind of what we're living right now. Kind of just exposes and makes fun of the political divide and all that stuff. It's very relevant social commentary, but it's also a hilarious and extremely entertaining movie. The cast is also phenomenal, and the action was great. I loved all the fight scenes so much, and I loved the ending of the movie. If you haven't seen it, it's great. I highly recommend it. So that being said, yes, The Hunt is a hit. Now, I actually have no movies to talk about from April, so I am gonna move right on to May. And I only have one movie that came out in May. I'm not sure why there was such a lack of movies at that time. Maybe that's just like not really a popular release time, is it? This movie came out on May 7th. It is a Shudder original, and it is called Z. If you haven't heard of it, it's about a young boy that has an imaginary friend, and it's a horror movie, so as you can imagine, it, you know, might not be what he thinks it is. And it was fine. It was entertaining. Some of the jump scares worked really well for me, but the rest of the movie fell a little bit flat. It's not great. I don't really recommend it, but if you have nothing else to watch, if you feel like you've seen everything and you have Shudder, it's worth checking it out. For myself personally, in my own standards, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a miss, but it is entertaining. It might be worth seeing. Just try it out for yourself. And that was actually all that I had for May, so let's move right on to June. The first movie from June stars Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried. It's called You Should Have Left, and this was released on June 18th. This movie was incredibly weird, and at the time, I was entertained by it. I thought that it was kind of cool. I thought that the story, it worked. It is pretty lackluster though. If you haven't seen it and you're kind of iffy about it, it wasn't really interesting you, I wouldn't recommend it. The cast is really good. It's also just really weird because Amanda Seyfried plays Kevin Bacon's wife, and the age difference is very strange, and it's also mentioned quite a few times in the movie. Overall, it's kind of just more of an uncomfortable experience rather than a horrifying one. And the larger scale sort of plot devices or scares that they tried to use were not very successful. I actually did an entire like half-hour long review of that movie with my dad, so you can check that out on my channel if you're interested. And I think I actually said that I liked it at the time, but having reflected on it a bit, I'm not super into it, so it's a miss for me. Up next is The Rental, that was also released on June 18th, and this was Dave Franco's directorial debut. I was really surprised to see that his directorial debut was not a comedy, but rather more of a thriller. And I was honestly just surprised that he was starting to direct at all. I mean, James Franco has obviously branched out into directing now, but Dave, I don't know, I just never really saw that for him, but good for him because this movie was actually quite compelling. Granted, the one thing that I think it could have benefited from is having more likable characters, because the characters that you follow, it's like, you probably won't like them and it makes what's going on a little bit less interesting, but what happens ultimately is very compelling. It's also quite dark. It's not something you would expect from Dave Franco whatsoever, but I actually really enjoyed it. I don't know about rewatchability, but it is definitely worth seeing at least once, so The Rental is a hit for me. And the last movie from June was released on June 24th, and it is called #Alive. It is a zombie movie that was made in South Korea. Now in South Korea, they obviously know how to make a very good zombie movie. They're very big into zombies right now, but see Train to Busan if you want any proof of that. That is probably the best zombie movie of all time, and I know that Peninsula also came out in 2020. I didn't put it on this list, but I just heard it was so bad that I didn't want to see it. I didn't really want to talk about it, but here I am. Anyways, so #Alive, I think it's worth seeing one time. I personally found it to be just a little bit boring. It is a really well-made film though. One of the central themes about it though seems to sort of be about social media as a positive thing, as it being something that connects one another. But overall, the movie doesn't really feel like something that we haven't seen before. It's good. It just plays on a lot of common tropes and the main message is not very interesting. But it's on Netflix for free, so maybe check it out, make your own opinion. Alright, moving on to July, and the first movie is Relic, which was released on July 3rd. So this is one of those horror movies that is definitely more of an artful experience than anything else. However, there are some horror elements, namely mold, that are used so grotesquely. It will effectively scare you. There are some kind of jumpy moments, and there are a lot of moments that get your heart racing. I think it's an effective movie, but also I would say the first half or so, or maybe just the first act, are extremely slow. It does take quite a while to get into the action, but once you get there, you get there. I did a very brief spoiler-free sort of review in one of my movies I've been watching lately videos a while back, so you can check that out if you'd like to. This is one that if you view horror movies more for the critical psychological elements, I think that you would really like it. For the common horror viewer, I don't know. I was able to appreciate it for all of the metaphors used. The imagery was really effective. It was a good story, but as also someone that enjoys just entertaining, common kind of escapist horror movies, I didn't really like it in that regard. So Relic is kind of a hit and a miss. It's a very well done movie, but I don't think you'll like it. So I'm gonna move on now to The Beach House, which was released on July 9th. A lot of people like this movie, and I think a couple people put this on their top 10 horror movies of 2020. There was also kind of some hype about this movie, especially on Twitter, and people were talking about it. I didn't really like it. I thought that it was actually a pretty weak movie. Now, I did find it interesting. Initially, I really liked this group of characters that we were following. It was very weird, very uncomfortable, very mysterious. I was really looking forward to seeing where it would go, but then it just fell kind of flat and the whole plot just kind of disappeared. There wasn't really much of a plot at all to this movie, and the ending with kind of the reveal and what ended up happening to some of the characters, it was all very ambiguous, and not in a good way where it kind of keeps you thinking and you're thinking of all these different possibilities and whatnot and all the psychological implications and whatever. It was more so just confusion and like, oh, that's it. If you like gore, there are some really good body horror moments, but they're kind of few and far between. This is also a Shudder original movie, so I don't know if you have Shudder. So The Beach House was a miss for me personally, but it seems like for the vast majority, most people loved it, so maybe try it out. Now for the last movie of July, and that would be Host, which was released on July 30th. So it was a good movie. It was fine. It kind of just felt like a melding of a lot of horror movies that I've seen before. Dare I say it was nearly an exact crossover of Unfriended and Paranormal Activity. The only thing unique about it is that it took place during this pandemic in modern times. And it was a miss for me. And so many people loved it. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I just feel like it is a movie that I have seen before and it was nothing special. I think one reason why people connected with it so much is because it was so relatable to the current times. Well, back when people were actually respecting social distancing and seeing their friends via Zoom and stuff like that. I think that's the only reason why, because other than that, it is kind of a lackluster and very derivative piece of art. Okay, moving on to August, there is just one movie from this month, and it is The New Mutants, which was released on August 28th. I actually only watched about the first half hour of this movie because it is indeed so bad. It's a shame because I remember when the trailers first came out so long ago, I thought it looked really good. I really liked the cast. It has Charlie Heaton, right? Heaton or Keaton? I think Charlie Heaton from Stranger Things. It also stars Anya Taylor-Joy, but one of the worst parts of this movie was actually her performance. I don't know if this was at a time in her career when she couldn't turn down roles, you feel what I mean? But she was genuinely awful in this movie. And she's so talented. I'm gonna talk about one more thing that she was in 2020 that I loved. But in this movie, she plays, I think, a Russian girl, and her accent is so bad and so inconsistent. I think that the fact that she had so much success starring in Split and was so unbelievable in that movie, I think that's the only reason she got the part in this movie. Because based on that accent, I just cannot imagine that an audition for this movie went well for her. But yeah, I only got through the first half hour. It's not interesting. It's not well acted. It's just not good.
Also, I just found this promotional poster and somebody help me. Oh my god. What is this? What is going on in this picture? Why are they staggered like that in the picture? You can barely see Charlie Heaton. The other girl is like peeking around Anya Taylor-Joy, and tell me, what is going on with Anya Taylor-Joy's face? Oh, in the movie, her character is like this Russian mean girl, but she also has a hand puppet. It's very confusing. I'm just sorry, I just had to share this picture.
All right, this is a movie that I didn't actually end up seeing. It is called I Am Thinking of Ending Things, and it released on September 4th on Netflix. This movie looked good. I still want to see it. It's just one of those movies that I think it's over 2 hours long, or it's like an hour and 50 minutes long. It's long, okay? I have trouble getting myself to sit down for movies that are that long, so I just kind of kept putting it off, and I never ended up seeing it before filming this video. It looks good. I would like to know your thoughts on it. Let me know if I should watch it or not. Up next is The Babysitter Killer Queen, which came out on September 10th, and I loved the first Babysitter movie so much. Like, that is just the type of horror comedy, dark comedy that appeals to me in such a specific and spiritual way. As I was talking about those two Lucy Hale movies earlier, I feel the same way about The Babysitter and Ready or Not, because they both star Samara Weaving and they both just have the perfect blend of humor and horror, and this movie falls into that category as well. I'll be the first to admit that the first 20 to 30 minutes are a little bit weak. They're a little bit way too corny, a little bit way too much relying on those corny elements, but then it gets so good when we have the cast that returns, and oh my gosh, all of the guilty pleasure gore and the comedy and everything. The movie is kind of a mess, but it's amazing. And it also pays such a great tribute to the first Babysitter movie. It's incredible. I don't recommend it if you don't like dark comedies. Okay, this movie is not going to be for everybody. And a lot of people think that this movie just relied on too much of what it did from the first one, but it relied on most of the things that made the first one so great. So I don't really see the problem with that. This is another one of those that for me is not just a hit. It's like a So anyways, moving on. This is the last movie on this list that I never ended up seeing, and that is Antebellum, which came out on September 20th. No, it did not. It came out on September 18th. Again, I just heard that this one kind of had weird conflicting messaging. It just was not well done. I've heard that it was kind of trying to be a Jordan Peele movie and have good social commentary, but it did not get there, and it was very kind of ambiguous and confusing. If anyone out there liked it, let me know. Let me know if it's worth seeing. I don't think that it is, and I'm not gonna pay for it, to be honest. But that was the last major thing to come out that I did not see, I'm pretty sure. So everything else on this list I have seen. So moving on to Ratched, which also came out on September 18th. I loved this show. A lot of people didn't. I think this show was for the girls and the gays. I did an entire like 42-minute review on this entire show if you want to see it. In my opinion, I think that Ryan Murphy has done it again. The cast, the acting, the costuming, the color palette, the story, everything was so good. I didn't love the ending. I didn't love the way that they were just obviously setting it up for a season 2, but the rest of the show was incredibly strong. I already did an entire, very long-winded review of that, so I'm gonna move on. Now we are getting into October movies, and the first one came out on October 2nd, and that is Possessor. There's been a lot of hype about this movie online recently, and I cannot really understand why. My dad and my boyfriend and I all tried to watch this movie, and we got about 45 minutes into it, I would say, and we rented it, we paid for it, and we decided that we didn't want to keep watching it. I think that my issue with it is that it is just completely humorless. And that's not necessarily a bad bad thing. Some movies are just very serious and very grounded. However, I feel like that kind of takes all human nature out of it. And so I just did not relate to any of the characters in the movie. The dialogue was very strange. There were also some sequences that felt extremely experimental and very weird, and it was very artful. They were cool, but it all just felt very disjointed, and I wasn't a fan of it. It was a miss for me. So if you like that movie, I'm very curious to know why and what you enjoyed about it, so let me know down below. Moving on to another Netflix original TV show, and that would be The Haunting of Bly Manor, which came out on October 9th. This is a show that again was marketed as a horror show, and then it ended up being just a drama show. It had a little bit of horror sprinkled in, but it was a drama. So for that reason, I really didn't like it because it was not what I was expecting, and it was entertaining to a degree, but it also dragged so much. Like, entire episodes could have been deleted. I also made a very long-winded review of The Haunting of Bly Manor if you want to watch that, so go find that on my channel. I don't want to talk about it too much because I have already talked about it so much, so I'm gonna move on. Up next, yet another Netflix original show, and that is The Queen's Gambit, which came out on October 23rd. This show is so good. I don't even know what about it is so appealing to me. I think it's just the fact that it is so incredibly well made, and the production design is gorgeous. All the acting is amazing. I loved it, and I have never played chess a day in my life, but now I want to buy a chessboard. Actually, my dream is to buy a little mini travel chess set so that when me and my boyfriend go backpacking across Europe, we can like play chess on the trains and stuff. Sorry, tangent. Queen's Gambit is a hit, no doubt. Up next is a movie called Spell, which was released on October 30th. I think this was released just straight to Amazon. You can rent it for like $6 or something. This one I feel like has not really been talked about, so I'm gonna read off the synopsis. While flying to his father's funeral in rural Appalachia, an intense storm causes Marcus to lose control of the plane carrying himself and his family. He soon awakes wounded, alone, and trapped in Miss Eloise's attic. Eloise claims she can nurse him back to health with a hoodoo figure she's made from his blood and skin. Marcus desperately tries to break free from her dark magic and save his family from a sinister ritual before the rise of the blood moon. This movie is literally just misery, but with black people and in a very strange setting. What I really didn't like about this movie is it seems like it was trying to make some sort of race commentary, and like it was trying to make commentary between black people that live in rural areas versus black people that are wealthy and live in cities, but it never really got there, and it seemed very confused with what it was trying to say, because this main character, I can't remember if it's Marcus or Marquise, but he doesn't want to return to his rural hometown. He has all these prejudices about rural people and whatnot, and then the movie just kind of proves all of his prejudices to be true, so it's very strange. I do not recommend it. Spell was a miss for me. Up next, this also came out on October 30th, and that is season 2 of The Mandalorian. I love The Mandalorian. I thought that the season 2 was even better than the first season, honestly. I loved all the new characters, the new locations, all of the action that happened. I thought it was phenomenal. I also dedicated an entire video to just the finale of season 2, so if you want to watch that, go find that on my channel as well. If you're not a Star Wars nerd, I don't think you'd care about it, but even if you're not, it is such a well done show. You'd probably still like it anyways. Plus Baby Yoda. I mean, come on. I'm gonna move on now to November, and the first movie from November is Freaky, which came out on November 13th. This movie is a dark comedy, and it stars Vince Vaughn, and it just holds such a special place in my heart. It is more of a comedy than a horror, that is for sure. But the kills are actually phenomenal, and they're so creative. This movie feels like a love letter to both Freaky Friday and just to slashers in general. It's phenomenal. I think even if you don't like dark comedies, if you like comedy at all in movies, I think you would really like this movie. It's extremely self-aware, also kind of feels like Scream a little bit, and it also pays homage to like Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that stuff. So I could not recommend it more, honestly. Please watch Freaky. It is such a hit for me. Up next is a Hulu original called Run, and this came out on November 20th. Now again, I did an over 30-minute long review of this movie with my dad, so if you want to watch that, go find it on my channel. I have talked everybody's ear off about this movie already. I thought it was really well done. It does feel a little bit derivative of old movies, but there are some great new elements in it. I think it's a hit. Okay, moving on to the last month of the year. I hope that you're still with me. Let me know if you are. Just comment like, I made it to December or something. I don't know. Up first is a Netflix Netflix documentary called Alien Worlds that came out on December 2nd. This one is kind of in the same vein as Cosmos Possible Worlds, but it discusses alien worlds, as if that wasn't obvious, but it applies all of the laws of physics and science that we know on Earth, and it applies them to different planets in the galaxy. So they show off some seriously weird creatures, and it is so trippy, it is so cool. The show is a definite hit. My only issue with it is that they reuse a lot of the animation. Like, you'll notice the exact same shots are kind of used over and over. Now, I don't blame them because I know that this level of animation and CGI and stuff is very expensive, it's very time consuming, so I don't really blame them for that. I just wish that they hadn't made that choice. But I get it, it's still a hit. I think you should check it out. Up next is Hunter x Hunter, which came out on December 18th, and this stars Devon Sawa, who you would recognize from the very first Final Destination movie, and this movie is incredible. It's very psychological, it is very much a slow burn, but it's also an incredibly unique story. I've never seen anything else like it before. And if you've seen any of the buzz about it on Twitter, everyone really loves this movie because of the ending. The ending is so unbelievably crazy. It is worth it. Even if you don't like slow burn movies, I promise the last like 5 to 10 minutes of the movie are worth your time. The degree of realism is also very gross, so bear that in mind. Very psychological, very twisty. I think it's an amazing movie. Okay, moving on to the brand new George Clooney movie called Midnight Sky. This was released on December 23rd. I said very recently that I want more movies about space. I want to see more sci-fi movies. I want more beautiful visuals up on my screen. Midnight Sky delivered. The story and the plot are a little bit weak, but I can excuse that because sometimes that's just the case for movies that take place in space. Because in reality, we watch movies about space for the visuals. We watch them out of wonder, out of dreaming of what it would be like to be out there. And this is one of those. The plot and the story is fine. There's kind of a weird twist at the end, and it's like cute. But watch this movie for the visuals. The CGI is gorgeous. The acting performances are all really good, and I loved it. I will definitely watch it again because it checks off all the boxes of why I love space movies. And for the last 4 things that I have to talk about, they all came out on Christmas. 2 of them are misses, so I'm gonna start with those. The first is Promising Young Woman. This was a very strange movie, and it's a shame because I was so excited about it because of the trailer. It made the movie look so good. It looked like an amazing revenge movie. Like, girl power, me too, I was on board with it, and then I saw it. So it ended up being kind of a dramedy, but the only comedy in it really was from Bo Burnham, and yes, Bo Burnham stars in this movie. It also looked like it had an extremely low budget despite some of the actors that were in the movie. Majority of it was shot in a place that I actually worked. It is an abandoned campus in Pomona near LA. And then most of the other set locations were very simple. They very much looked like dressed sets. It was strange. And the movie totally fell flat. I think that what it would have benefited from is if it had been way trimmed down. Because as is, there was just so much left in it that felt extremely unnecessary. And I was like, okay, let's move this along. And then the ending, it sucked. It could have been good, but then it just didn't pack enough of a punch for me to appreciate it. So Promising Young Woman, yeah, definitely a miss. I don't really recommend it. The other miss of Christmas Day was, unfortunately, Wonder Woman 1984. There is so much that is wrong with that movie. I found it entertaining, and most of it was pretty enjoyable, but also a lot of it was so unbearably stupid. And some of it was quite damaging, and I kind of want to go on like a full-winded rant about it, but that's for another day. So I'm gonna move on now to the 2 hits, the hard hits of Christmas Day. The first one is obviously Soul. This is an amazing, gorgeous Pixar animation movie, and I'm sure you've heard about it. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now, but it's incredible, and it's one of the first animation movies from Pixar that I feel like truly is for adults. And that's absolutely not to say that kids can't watch it. I think that there should be more G-rated adult content because then their kids can watch it with them. And it's still very whimsical. I think that children can absolutely enjoy it. I've heard that they do, but it's definitely for adults. And I think that it was just so impactful. I think the message of it was really important, especially because of everything that's going on today. And no, it's nothing like race related or political or anything like that. It's just about living life. It's amazing. Obviously, you probably already know that, so I'm gonna move on. The very last thing I'm gonna talk about today, oh my gosh, this has been a long video, is Bridgerton. This is a Netflix original show that has blown my mind. I also saw this TikTok that I need to play for you right now because of I need to.
I don't really understand how everyone became so horny all of a sudden. I don't really get the... Oh, shit. Oh, shit. No, I get it.
This show, it may appear as if it is only for the girls and the gays, but I want the straight men watching this to watch that show. You know why? Because you could learn a thing or two. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to go on a long-winded rant about this show as well because I loved it so much and there are so many things to talk about with it. So you know what? Yeah, expect that. I don't know if it'll be on my channel, it might be on my Patreon, so if you want to support me, you can see that over there. But there is just way too much to talk about that show, and I know this has been a long video, so I want to wrap things up. Here are some things to love about that show. It's shot from the perspective of the feminine gaze, the cast, the drama, the romance, the costumes, and the fact that it imagines the past as being very multiracial and ethnically inclusive. And it was created by a Black woman, shout out Shonda Rhimes. It is probably my favorite thing that I saw the entire year. It's not just a hit, it's not just a hit. It is a hit. It's like if I could grab you by the shoulders and just shake you and tell you watch this show. That is how intensely I feel about it, and that is how much I am anticipating season 2 already. So, oh my god. Those are all my hits and misses of 2020. If there's anything that I missed, maybe comment down below and I'll just respond to your comment, let you know how I felt about it. But I think that those were all the most major pop cultural sort of movies that came out. I didn't mention Mank or like other sort of Oscar grab type movies. Those are ones that I typically save to watch in February right before the Oscars. So those types of movies I have not seen yet, just a little FYI. But I'm sure that Mank is phenomenal like everybody's been saying. So now I'm very tired. The sun has now gone down and so it is time to wrap up this video. If you stayed till the end, I appreciate you so much. If you'd like to follow me on social media, that'll all be linked down below. My vlog channel will be linked down below, my Patreon, etc, etc. Stay tuned for my content next week. I do have my ranking of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise as well as the Child's Play franchise. If you're new, I hope you hit the subscribe button and the like button. It does help me out quite a lot. I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!
We'll be right back.